7, pledge allegiance. I pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Extras? I just need someone to approve the minutes from June 17th.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Public participation. Everybody's on summer break. And correspondence, I don't think we had any, and Michelle didn't forward any, unless I missed something. I think there was one thing, but it was actually here.
Yeah, it was. It's kind of.
So it's got some of the, that's the only thing. Any points of information? Well, student rep report.
Figured that nothing on the.
Yeah, we got progress reports. I think most people got them around the 20th, so last Thursday. At the high school, that is our final progress reports, and that's absolutely it. Let's end this meeting early.
That's all you got.
Hey, I'm trying my best to keep it Zoom.
I know.
Do you keep up your band skills over the summer?
That I am trying to do,
Okay.
but
You're doing your band, right? You're telling me?
yes.
How's that band? It's great.
Yep. But otherwise,
Oh, like in a band?
Isn't it band?
Yes.
Oh.
You organize
John?
I don't know if I can give it a
Genre?
single genre, but jazz is one of them.
Okay.
I would say MTV would be interested, but nobody knows what that is anymore, right?
Yeah.
They don't play
No
music
longer.
anymore.
Dude, they're not even doing it.
No, it's like shows.
For 10+ years.
That's depressing.
Good luck with that, Fisher.
Thank you.
And we hope you have a fantastic summer.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
All right, we're already up to you.
And Kate's here. We give her a round of applause because she walked here.
We're gonna give you a ride home. Sam or I will give you one, ride home, no. Okay. I'll be late.
Okay, so first is obsolete surplus equipment. This is not an unusual thing. We've seen this before a couple times. It does come up around this time of year. Take a look. This typically has with it, using my manual, I don't think. This usually has with it a list of the equipment that's going out. Typically, this equipment is either broken or it's not usable with the equipment that we have. For instance, you can't plug much into it anymore, that kind of thing. The cost of repair would typically be higher than the equipment itself, or buying something else. So if you take a look at the list, typically what we do, whether you want to do this as a first reading or you'd like to push it over to next time, but it'd be great if we could just do it. You'll take a look, review the equipment, and then we do a motion to move it to action, and then we declare it obsolete, and we turn it over to the town in accordance with Board of Ed Policy 3040. So, their glass door fridge, slushy machine, which I don't know that, damaged food cart, food service racks, very old equipment or books, Samsung, these old TVs, VCRs. Again, some of those are just broken, and repairing them costs more than buying a new one. RF modulator, various overhead projectors that are old now. I think at one point somebody asked to see the projectors because they wanted to purchase one, and that is possible, but when the person came to look at what was left, it was a complete, it looked so horrible they decided against it. And I told them over the phone it probably wasn't worth the drive down, but you know, they came, looked at it, did not want it. So this is basically the list, to do it with as you please, or to move over to next time if you want to give it a first read.
I'll make a motion to move item G1 to J1 for action, or to
Should be
J2 action.
Second?
Any discussion? Probably a good idea, because we're not really meeting in June, or July, right?
It would be nice.
All in favor, to move it to board action J2? Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions, motion carries.
So the next item is the custodial contract. This is the red line version of the Upsu bargaining unit's custodial contract. This contract was negotiated in good faith last couple of weeks and on schedule for the timeline that we have. We are moving into negotiation season, and we started with the custodians, and it's going to start getting busy with the teachers and the admin, and then beyond that, we have again the second cycle of the pairs and the other bargaining units, nurses coming up again. So this particular unit is finished with this red line. It's given to the union and their membership to vote on. They've approved it, and now it's in front of you as the Board of Education to approve. Once you approve it, we can put it into action. If you want to look through the red line and take a look at it again, you can decide whether or not how you want to handle this. When you are ready to do this, you move it to J1, and then ultimately, when you are ready, the motion is to accept the Upsu custodian agreement. We do have Karen's part of the negotiating team, Jeff, and Michelle. Michelle's not going to be in the room. So she's the chair of the negotiating team, but those are your three, and of course I attend that as well. So if you want to look through it, if you have any questions, you can go over some of the basics. I'd like to just kind of shoot through basics real quick.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so GWI increase, year 1 is a 2.5, year 2 is a 2.0, year 3 is a 1.0. The reduction from production down to 6 steps, it's the elimination of a step. There is some elimination of old language, and the percentage of the health contract is adjusted. They have a increase. The health insurance rates for 1920, 2021, and 21-22 are 15.5%. They're under an HSA, HDHP plan. It's $2,000, $4,000 for in-network, $4,000, $8,000 for cost share, maximum out-of-network. And the life insurance, 1920, 2021, 2021-22, you get 17.5%. There's adjustment language for excise tax, and there are some basic union language revisions. For instance, we changed the duration of the contract, that type of thing. And there's also proposed language, the language that was accepted is changing the number of family sick days so that they can use more of their sick days for family sick days. And then the standard changes. There's a shift differential when they go from the normal school year to the summer. And so people that are typically paid at a certain rate during the school year were actually getting hit when they're from their shift for the typical school year into the summer. So they changed that shift differential. So it's $1 for each hour working the second shift, which puts it back closer to what they're typically getting in the first. So they were being forced to change shifts, and then they were losing income. So there was an adjustment made there. Custodial unit accepted this, and we're in a good position with them. I think it was done really well. It was done in good faith. we're still very competitive in what we pay, we're not over, we're not under, and, that's about it. But if you have anything else, I can write it down, and I can find. I'll let you look at this for a minute rather than me prattling on. There's one other piece of information.
So you see the term lead custodian and head custodian, are they different people or is it the same?
They're typically the same person.
So there's the term lead custodian is equal to the term head custodian? And is, are the financials, how do the financials for 1920 compare to the budget? Or is it within our budget?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely, it was what we, we obviously make a plan for that, and this, we're not gonna be over because of this. The cost of contract, differential, would be about 35,000 year one, 28 year two, and 20 year three. No impact for health, there's no real change. That's all.
There's a step in each year?
There are steps, but not everybody, yes. Yeah, there are steps.
And step one was eliminated.
Steps also.
Is that because of minimum wage
It's,
expectations?
it was a part of what they wanted it, and it was something that we could accommodate. And looking at number of people in each step, the impact was not, where they are was not really.
Of this.
A few people out there who see it.
It's coming up after that. There you go. The next one is
This one.
the new stuff.
This packet was online, right? People have
It's
access to
online,
it.
so anybody can see it. Plus, the old contract is also online. All of the contracts are online under the, the district site, HR, and I think they're under bargaining unit.
Thank you.
Any other reason not to move it to action today? Again, we're off for the summer, for June at least.
If you didn't, you might have to have a special session to.
I'll make a motion to move item G2 to J3, custodian contract. To board action.
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That's J3.
Yeah. All right, the next item on the agenda is G.
Sorry, well,
I'm sorry.
is this last page supposed to be something different? Oh, it's the old signature page, is that why? Because of the new dates?
Yeah.
Okay. It's old signatures, not,
Yeah, it's,
They
well, let
haven't-
me find what I'm talking about. Yes, that's old.
that's old.
That's from the, because there's a copy of some of the old line. It's a markup red
Okay.
line. So what you're
Got it.
seeing is the end of last times.
Okay.
Does the lead and head custodian have to be identified as the same person, or?
They generally should be doing the same person. The head custodian is the one that is on this, the evening shift. They all report to the head. I think that's the lead too, frankly, but I'll have to look.
I don't know if it,
Because there's a bargaining unit head, there's a bargaining unit leader, and then there's the head custodians. And so I just have to make sure that whatever language you're talking about doesn't relate to them. bargaining, not to one person. But they generally serve on the negotiating team. So we had, we had head, and their lead negotiator. But that, during the evening shifts, it's your head.
Should we turn to more discussion since we just wanted to?
Guess we can revisit it when we're
Yeah,
on
I don't
action
know what
then.
When we come to action, I guess we can talk about it.
But once you.
Yeah, we'll talk about it, not mean to cut you off.
It's
That's all right.
Technically,
I don't have to ask
I mean,
it.
I don't care.
Well, I'll remind you when we get to it.
G3.
Okay, so for G3 tonight, we have the FRC grant. This is one of the no-brainers. The FRC is obviously one of our most important programs. It provides early pre-K services. It also has some element of daycare service for families. We fill out requests and typically get a grant each year. It's a self-sustaining program. We have to have the grant in soon, and having the grant approved by the board, just like any of our other grants that I bring in front of you, it's money that we are getting. So the program itself does, as I've said in the past, is a self-sustaining program. So there's no reason not to say yes to this grant, because it's just going to give the community more resources. Laura Leibowitz, Carol, and the others who run it do an amazing job. People that use it adjusts for income. So if people in Tolland who have a hard time for whatever reason, it adjusts to help. And it just is one of the great resources available to the people in Tolland. And I think most of you know about it and know the track record of it. So the grant itself is a State Department of Education grant too. So it's, if we do this, we get it typically. But if we don't do it and don't get it in,
Then our families lose out.
then yes, then we'll lose this grant. And the grant is an important part of the program.
I can ask questions now, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah, you can.
I know that folks have, I've heard complaints that there aren't enough spots. Is there any way, you know what I mean?
Like that they fill up fast.
Yeah, they fill up really, yeah, so like, I'm just wondering if there's anything that we could do to expand the program, or is that just not even a viable option?
I think it's a good question. I would have to talk to Laura Leibowitz and see what her feelings were and what it would take to expand the program. She and I have talked a lot about the program itself and certain aspects of it, but
Because it is super popular, people
Yeah.
love it, very happy with the quality of care that folks
Are you
get.
talking, about a particular program, like
Is
the
that the
preschool
school or
program?
the
after
summer
school.
program?
After school.
Oh, after school,
Yeah.
specifically after school
Yeah.
fills up fast?
Yeah.
I can see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a daycare kind of buffer for
And they're right at
folks, I'm
school,
guessing, like,
especially for
Right, it's like
that age
so
group,
super
it's
easy,
super
yeah.
easy, they go right from
fewer transitions,
class
it's
to FRC.
awesome, and it promotes community after, you know, it's great. I have no issues with the grant. I'd like to make the
Did it-
program bigger.
yeah, and there's, if you look through, there's various letters of support for this. I had a booklet of students' testimonials.
Oh my God.
There are pictures of things, and I just didn't say too much to carry, but, you know, it's
Just for the
this is
cute.
just such an easy thing to go with here.
Mhm.
It's $100,000, and, you know,
Is
like, there's just no reason not to do this.
This is a-
Laurel and Carol do a fantastic job.
no doubt.
Just a general comment, just for me, like, they've done a fantastic job, they offer a lot of great programs for families.
Is this one of the grants that you manage?
Well, it's Laurel really, I help them, help their program, and Laurel
Sure.
manages this. She manages this whole program. This is all her and her staff, Carol and others. Now, we do have conversations about certain things, and Tom Swanson is actually technically the head of that, the schooling program, but And she and I have talked frequently about the program and certain things that we can do with it. And we have done some great things, and she's very flexible with ideas that I've shared. But she's the one who deserves all the kudos for this being a successful program.
Do you need us to, do we have to approve it, or is this
Yes,
just a?
please
oh, okay.
approve it.
Oh,
And it's in a grant that
where's that part?
you can get it or not get it. I would recommend getting it, so I would approve this. I guess I normally wouldn't push you to move something, but I would move this to J4 for action.
Motion to move this item to J4.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay. All right, so back to E or G4 now. Should be E or Y on the papers, right?
Same.
Yeah, it's really long.
It's really long.
There's no attachment.
Oh.
Yeah,
there's
no,
no
there's,
further-
Not
there's
for
nothing
this.
there for the
Oh,
G4.
Search is in vain.
I'm
Yes,
committed now. If it's like I do it.
you're only gonna get to the minutes.
Oh, I am?
Yeah.
Council minutes, yeah,
So
that's
when
it.
you're ready.
Never mind.
Okay,
I give
so,
up. I'm ready.
so this is, G4 is end of year reconciliation. And, you know, I've obviously been paying close attention to how things are playing out and looking at trying to make things as straightforward as possible for all entities involved. So there's been a couple of conversations that I talked to the board chair and vice chair. I have some information to hand out that I think is responsive to at least one of the questions that our council had. I can go over some of these pieces as part of this G item, and then of course we can just take it and go from there. We will have, after EFS is closed sometime in August, September, we'll have final numbers on all of our line items. We should have the final numbers on most of the line items in that range of time, August and September, so as things come in and everything clears out. But this, which I thankfully managed to get to a double-sided page, is some information that might be helpful in the conversation. And the board can tell me what they would like me to do with it. You can either read it yourselves, have me forward it, or whatever. So I wanted to provide it to you just to see what you wanted to do with it. I don't have, you know, in the time that I have, this is what I was able to pull together right now. We obviously are really, there's a lot going on right now, so it's, you know, as we get closer to August again in September, I think in those meetings we'll be able to provide the final detail or whatever that, you know, whatever questions might come up, relate you to it, we can answer. But we're not there yet. So just to go over this quickly, there were some areas that, there were some questions about, you know, recent, say, spring purchases, and what they were. So I'm gonna go through that right now and see if I can answer any questions that you have. And just keep in mind again that the process is not complete, and we're still doing this process. And August, September is the best time to do the final resolve. But it seems like there were some conversations, and I'm just trying to be helpful. So hopefully everybody's okay with that. So where we're at right now is Code 320 was a question that came up. Literacy How, Amy Laurent, who is a trainer for an autism program. She talked to our administrators today. She's working directly with staff. And the Literacy How program is the one that we have implemented. It helps us avoid outplacements. It's a structured literacy program. It's extremely important in the effort to avoid outplacements. It's in connection with our Spire and Phonics programs. It's one of our big trifectas in making sure that we aren't susceptible to sending more kids out. We've been successful in reducing our outplacements. I think we went from 33 2 or 3 years ago down to 19. We see another.
You said from 33 to 19.
Yeah, in some behavior programs. We also noticed a bubble coming, and we are continually responding to the information that we see coming up. So there's a bubble coming in some other areas, and we're adjusting to that too. So we're constantly looking for ways to be proactive and to head off some of these things. And again, I want to reiterate that the purpose of what we do is to provide the best possible program for students we can. So it's not saving, it's not that voiding out placements is the only goal. It's something that happens, which is good, but the purpose here is to provide the best program for kids locally that you possibly can, and I believe that's what we're doing and continue to do
I just have
in
a
this
quick question
situation.
about literacy health,
Of
since you're
course.
talking about it.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
you're still talking about literacy health. What are, could you just give a couple examples of some of the resources that are correlated to the literacy health program?
Yeah, I mean, I can do
Is
it.
it like training and?
Oh, absolutely.
Like all of that?
It's a ton of training. They come here, it's resources, materials, training,
Materials?
intensive training. It's in phonology and sound symbols, and, morphology and syntax, and, it's everything about reading now that we need. And the state pointed out statewide that in the state, so I'm making a statement about teachers in the state. So that would include ours, but that doesn't mean it's that ours did something wrong. It didn't. But in the state, K through K5 teachers were identified as not being well trained in reading. And that was affecting large populations of kids. It's also resulting in more problems in terms of helping avoid children falling into problems with dyslexia, things like that. We noticed some problems and we needed to address them. Again, the budgets are made 18 to 20 months in advance, so a lot of times things will come up in that 18 to 20 month period because you're starting to make it in November, and it ends, and then, it ends basically November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, all going to the next year, and it ends in June of that following period, so it's usually 18 months. So we can see some things coming, but when we see and hear and start to identify problems that are going to really hit us hard, we have to react, and we have to make sure that we have the proper training. And Literacy House is part of that training, and
Is this
we lay into it
K
heavily.
through 5, did you say? Or is it?
Yeah,
further?
it's primarily the early primary and primary and into 5, but it's also in combination with Spire and in combination with foundations, and we have to be responsive to these things, or when we are in PPTs, they'll ask what we have done, and we will not have anything to say, and that will be bad. It'll be bad because we won't be providing appropriate services for kids, and then it'll be bad because, then you might want to look for services elsewhere, understandably, if they don't feel like those things are happening. So, that's the kind of thing, that we would be looking to adjust to if there's funds to do so, and there are. So that makes a logical move in that direction. Technicians are, sorry.
What was Dr. Kearns? Oh, what was Dr. Kearns?
Dr. Kearns. Right up to Dr.
I know you said
Kearns.
Amy
I'm not
Laura
familiar
was
with him.
autism trainer.
Yep, and she came to us today. She's part of the CERTS program, SCRTS program. I don't know what the acronym exactly is. But she's an autism specialist, specializing in the programming of students in an inclusive environment. And our school system has a significant population of kids who need this attention. So our students and staff, and are in work with her. She's out of Rhode Island. She comes here and does the training. She was here today, and it's helping us in infinitely amazing ways. A few years ago, when we first looked at this problem, there were 6 kids that was about $1.6 million outplacement for about 6 in the zone. And this was going back at this point. So there's a reason to have that kind of service. Dr. Kearns is he's a specialist in database interventions. So he's skilled in looking at how to drill down data to identify instructional shifts and to create plans for student learning. He's working with our interventionists and our special teams in K-5 zone to help refine how we use data to identify student populations that need help. And so he's helping us become more sophisticated in that way. And these things are very important in serving the students of Tolland, but also helping to offset potential problems that might arise.
Christina has some questions.
Sure.
So actually,
Go ahead.
So, literacy how is a model, it's not like the 154 is buying the reading model, or is there software, what is,
It's the training. They
It's the
come,
training
there's a
and
training, and I
materials.
can't remember
Training and
her
materials.
name, but she comes here and trains our people.
okay, and then, but then
And it's
Amy,
materials as well.
so are they different, the people that come and do the training, they're different than Amy and Dr. Kearns?
Yeah.
Those are three different programs. So
Different
literacy
program.
how is like the reading.
Oh.
And Amy is
okay.
a autism specialist. Literacy house, structural
All right, so
literacy.
they're three different.
They're three different
Okay,
things.
all right.
I found out
So-
what CERT stood for, which is Amy Laurent, and it stands for Social Communication, Emotional Regulation, and Transactional Support. All autism and regulation behavior.
And the key there is regulation. You know, a lot of people don't realize that you have to really work in that, on regulation versus behavior when it comes to students with autism, because
They don't get the social cues sometimes.
right.
Sometimes.
So it's all about regulation, and people typically, that are not familiar with that misunderstand it. When they misunderstand it, things go downhill quickly, and that's not good for anybody. So that's that.
So Amy and Dr. Kearns, do they each get paid just for coming out once, or are they coming out
They
throughout
come
the
out,
year?
it's a number of different times they come out. Literacy hours over a span. And it's support too. It means that when we have issues, the people that did receive help can reach back out. So for instance, Amy's available, Dr. Warren's available to me. So if I need to, I can call her and ask her, hey, this training we had today, I had a few questions about this, I have an issue coming up. One of the people that we had present today is willing to run more data for me, so I can lean in and say, hey, I need a data set on this particular population or group, and they'll run that and give us feedback about how to approach the problem. And then through the process, we learn and become much more informed about what we're doing. And at the end of the day, we're able to serve the student populations much better because of it. Same thing with foundations. This is not here, but that's one of the other programs that, that's phonics, and we really needed to give a real focus K-3 on phonics. We're noticing some significant issues there that we're going to exacerbate over time, and we were able to put that energy into it. But it's all, to do two things. It's to best serve the kids, and it's to make sure that we're not in a position when we are asked what you have done, that we haven't done it. In my tenure as superintendent, I didn't even know what foundations was when I first came in. And these kind of things come up on the radar quick. And then the data shows, wow, we've got a pocket of people here who are struggling with this. How are we going to effectively address it? We don't have anyone internally who's a super expert on phonics, for instance, per se. So we have to go and get people to come and do that training to help us. So.
I had a question.
Will literacy how help us with consistency between teachers in the same grade and from grade to grade?
Yeah, it should. I mean, in terms of response, they're being trained in the same response models and things like that.
And I think it was a little bit before your time, but those are the kinds of issues we were having. In my opinion, it was significant back in 2014 that we don't want to slip back into. And I'm thinking it's this kind of program.
It just, without the consistency, it creates teachers going off and doing their own things, and that's.
Well, and the teachers are extremely, they're great teachers, and they're well intentioned, well trained. This is like giving
It's like road now.
if you're building a new kind of engine, like, Pratt and Whitney was, and you needed some people trained on how to create that new combustion engine, they're selling to China, they bring in, people that can help train the people that are selling them. And the same kind of deal, you need to train your people to be able to fit a purpose, and this purpose is educating the kids in the best possible way, so we avoid, problems with their own struggles and also in the district issue.
And earlier you had said there's a bubble coming through.
So,
Can you explain that?
Yeah, we look ahead and look at, where things are kind of trending in terms of the populations we think that would be shifting. We make our best guesses and estimates, just like using the governor's budget. You're making an estimate based on what you think, might happen in the state. You use the governor's budget, even though, his has got a, his is a certain content, a certain kind of characteristics part of that. And we also take a look at what we're doing and, and what we think is coming, and we make plans and budgets based on that.
A bubble of what?
So there's a bubble of kids coming through who will need transition services. We do a great job, have internally a lot of people who can help with that. And I think that'd be a good opportunity for us to do our transition academy. It's a great program, really strong people, and we already did a workshop on it, and we're prepared. We reached out to the community. We've got partnerships in the community on it, so we're going to move the throttle forward on the transition program. And again, that means that we will be able to serve children that transition. They're transitioning typically out of high school. They're 18 to 21 roughly, and they're in need of these services. We can provide them, and they will have a great opportunity to do all kinds of work experiences in our community in the town and in and around. And we manage those for them and make sure their experiences are great. We can do that. We've been able to do that. I don't know why we haven't been doing that. And this will be something that will better serve the kids, and it'll help us when this bubble comes through. And right now we're starting to get into that, and it'll help the district and the town overall. A lot of our efforts, for instance, right now, going down from 33 to 19, if we hadn't done the things we were doing, you'd probably still be at the 33, and your transition bubble would be coming through.
Is there a way to quantify that?
So,
Is it 7 digits?
You can definitely, again, the discussion is always about ethics and education first. These things, the average cost of outplacement is somewhere in the 60 to 70,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you just add transport on top of that. But again, the purpose is to better serve the kids and do it in a way that's local with people that they know and they're working in their community and things like that. We can do it, and why not? So we position ourselves for that. That may mean that we have to do a little bit of shifting and transitioning, and we do it, and we get there. Right now, if we did our shifting and transitioning, part of the reason we can spend in some of these areas is we have about 730 to 780 in tuition. Next year, that tuition, those three lines that make it up for 730, will be reduced. We're taking that down by about 700,000, 711, something like that. So what we're up this year because of, doing the right thing, making projections, being careful, we're down next year because we're making that adjustment. So, one of the reasons we have the money to spend is we have that tuition money, and we can do that and take some proactive action to reinvest, get the loaders down, get some of these other things, and make sure we're continuing that trend. Continuing to buttress the programs that are so valuable. So it's all tactical, it's all strategic, we're constantly trying to adjust. Give an example of custodial negotiations. I did that. We did it without the legal support, and we're able to save probably quite a bit of resources. And so in that line item, we're also underspent. But and I could have just had the lawyers do that, but that was something I felt we could do this year, and so we have those funds to use also. So that 700 per thousand, another whatever that was, legal was 104,000. This negotiation for teachers is going to be in the tens, and if you go to arbitration, that's 70,000. So just to give you an idea of scope, negotiations, lawyers are $80 to $400 an hour, have the hour meetings, multiple meetings, then you have all the stuff they have to write up, all the things they have to do. Still consult with them, and I still consulted with them, but we were able to save a significant amount, and we've been trying to be careful about that. So there's ways you can do that, and then if you have some funds, you're able to then go after the McTie and associated understanding by design, for instance, to kind of jump. Because technical services, I really tell you what we spent those on, but I'm not an expert in electrical for Deming or acoustics or construction, overland flooring, all that stuff. I know that we've done that. The paving is part of the operating, it wasn't part of capital. So it's all that stuff, stuff that we were able to do. It's stuff that otherwise would have been a burden in other ways. The McTie in the travel and conference, that is understanding by design. We're going to use that as a district initiative. It's a very well-known program, and if you Google it, you can see the guy and see the thing. It's one of the most well-established programs in the district, and it does unify, as you were looking for, Sam, everybody's efforts, and we really need something like that in terms of assessment. And it has a sort of philosophy in very, very succinct and general terms of designing the assessment and working backwards from there. And that's a huge, truncation of everything that it is. But that getting everybody trained in that is really important in taking the next step in making our assessments better for gathering data and doing things.
And also for implementing master-based grading.
Yeah, and that master-based learning grading piece, these guys are big in that, and it helps make that better. Conferences, obviously we have an opportunity to do things, algebra, progress monitoring, things like that. That also plays into making sure that, progress monitoring terminology is the thing, and it means following kids and making sure that you reassess, improve, and they need to have that training, team training. It's the technical training. Team support, I send people to get trained so we can do our own team training in district. I'm the team, whatever you call me now, I'm the superintendent who's supposed to actually approve the team thing, but I'm also the team facilitator. Because when we lost the curriculum director, these were roles that person had, and I took them on. So I need help because I can't do the training myself. This trains trainers, and then I can use those trainers to train people here, and I set up a whole site for it, process, so we're doing well. True Colors, you saw one of the presenters from True Colors, Robin Kane, and we've been utilizing that as part of the culturally responsive ed program. A breakthrough coach teaches people to better manage their time and their use of resources. Women Leaders in Education was a big conference that sent some of the women to in the district. And I think they found it quite useful. They wrote about it in their narratives to me when I was doing their evaluations. So, that's more or less those line items. And again, when we get to the end, we'll be able to give more detail. Yeah.
I just have kind of not a silly question, but when we send people out of the district for a conference or something, that's different than professional ed services, like True Colors came in, right? And did training.
They come in, and this is a combination of when you are able to work with them, if you can make a good impression, they're willing to visit you sometimes, even if you go to their stuff. And some of their people here.
So that's why it falls.
So it can be
conference.
Yeah, this is a combination. This question was about 580, one of them, and this was stuff that got under 580.
Right.
So in a way, that's a large code, and I'm just trying to answer it based on the question, not necessarily anything else. And I'm trying to think of things that fall under that code.
Right.
And again, this is a really crazy. This is a intense time of year, so. And it's exacerbated by a couple of things we've had personally from the standpoint of loss to deal with, and it's there's some things that are complicating it. So there's just a lot going on right now. So this is what I can put together again in August, September.
Yes.
This is just to see.
No, I just didn't know if there was a difference between the categories.
Just coincidence, but page 79 in our packet was part of that grant application defines each one of the lines. So it defines line one, what goes on line 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. It's a standard chart of accounts. So you can see that line
As part of
300
the
purchase services, there's a definition, it's on page 79, it's part of the FRC grant.
FRC.
Yeah, it might help you see what goes to line 300 versus 500. You know, the
And
300
that's
series
that's
of
the
lines.
overall of
Yeah,
this stuff. And then it
right.
breaks down into like
Sub-
multi-10-digit
sub-
numbers, and then multi-ones of that tie into like
Right.
bigger ones. And
But
I would need like I would always have to go back and find out, what 730, which ones are in 730, you know?
To make a long story short, if you look on page
Okay.
79, the 300s are professional services, services which by nature can be performed by expert people. Line 500s
Yeah.
or other purchase services, so it's, you know, it's the kind of thing where people are going out.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Dan. That's cool.
You're welcome.
So, code 610, reading series, you know, and I can give some general idea of things like reading series. Typically, there's 26 reading levels on Fontes and Pinnell. And when you're doing it at a K-5 level, and I'm guessing, I know that we've done this, when I look at that, that's what I'm thinking of right now. And there's a lot of different things there, some of which I would need to have the curriculum supervisors come do a presentation on. But, you know, there's 26 levels, so when you have a classroom and you've got the kids in there, 20 whatever kids in the classroom, they have to be able to go pick a reader. The readers are on 3 levels, you know, there's 3 internal levels within levels, and they have to be able to grab that, and they're using these readers. And basic books also have reading levels ascribed to them. So the Hunger Games would have a level ascribed to it, and you then have Walt go pick the levels that are a part of that child's both reach and comfort level in terms of what they can read. So the big 5, or the 5 fingers, and they have all kinds of ways of talking about this. And if you misunderstand 5 of the words within a page, then that book is out of hard to, you know, it's not at the best level for you. So you want to pick another one. So these things fluctuate a lot, and you have to have the you know, classrooms must have the books available to do that. And a lot of the districts that are really doing well with this stuff have that. Second step is a behavior, I know that. And Bridges is a math program, math intervention. Sports stuff I'm not as familiar with. Newsella is a social science research engine that the kids use to learn how to do both social science research and citations.
There's
and
science stuff in there too, and it's leveled, and it's,
you can differentiate with
you
it.
differentiate in kind of like more your middle school and high school levels versus the elementary, which has historically had a lot of variation, where Nuzella's kind of a nice resource for, not a nice, it's a great resource.
Well, dovetails with reading too, because you can level it. So
That's what I'm
you
saying,
can really
so we can get into
differentiate
the
in a
concept.
classroom with kids at the middle and high school level.
Mhm.
You can then break them up and differentiate for them, which makes a lot easier to do RTI tier 1 and tier 2 services when you have that to differentiate. That kind of thing. Code 640, which is mostly textbooks. You know, we do have some, as I said, some areas where, you know, our budget's going to come in under budget, probably in the realm of 70. I'm guessing, and this is a guess, educated guess, somewhere in the 70,000 zone, something like that, and that's closer to what we were at typical years. So, you know, we do have the opportunity with some of these things that, you know, we have been able to recover some funds from, like health insurance, like the tuitions, like the substitutes, like that, to be able to do things like the textbooks that we need. We know that next year's budget, we're reducing a lot of things to trend, which is identified in April 10th minutes, I think, or our Board of Ed packet had a bunch of lines that we were reducing to trend. Similarly, we're reducing that sped to trend by about 700,000, and that was part of the plan going back months at this point in thing, which we were starting to look at. So this year we have an opportunity to do a few things here that we won't be able to necessarily do next year because of that steep, you know, kind of adjust. So there's lots of stuff here that that they want to get to be able to, in terms of textbooks, so that we have them for the next few years. And the ones that needed to be updated, that they wanted to make sure they had the chance to do, they're trying to make an effort to do that. LA testing is, these are pre-purchase packaged tests, and I don't know the acronyms for them, but they're designed to assess. I'm gonna go and take an educated guess about Dibblesdorf days, I can give all the acronyms, whether that means anything to you or not. There's standardized assessments that you typically have to give to kids, and it's part of your universal screening that's required by the state, and if you have them on hand, you can use them. If you do not have them on hand, none of them, they don't go bad, they're not like milk. So if you have them, you can use them when you need them, and then that's part of that. So getting through that, and then instructional equipment. There's an opportunity to replace some of these electronics, some of these things that are needed. There was some conversations about what we were going to do with the equipment now in some of these buildings. For instance, this is not what we're spending on right now, but just to give you an idea of something that could come on the horizon. Smart boards are being discontinued. They're an older technology. They have problems, the short throw projectors, and I'm just giving an example of something that could change in the future. So like if there was an opportunity to replace that TIS, your smart boards at some point, it might be a fairly big expense to do that. Luckily, Promethean boards that are going to be brought in, hopefully to Birch Grove, will be 89% reimbursed, because they're going to have to rip these things out in Birch Grove. They're not going to do well with the ripping out, and you can't, they're old anyway, so it's not going to go well. So the Prometheans would be going in, assuming that you're getting the 89% reimbursement, and that conversation would have to play out based on that fact. Trajectory of that conversation has to come out based on that. But let's say time comes for TIS to use Promethean boards versus smart boards, because they're not supported anymore in many ways. They would then, if there was some funds available someday, somewhere, even your Ed Reserve Fund funds, has an area for technology, although I would like to keep most of those for special ed fluctuations personally. But, just giving you context, that kind of thing, a Promethean board, that's fairly expensive. And if you're going to outfit a school with the Prometheans, they're going to be $4,000 a unit. So nothing in
each classroom.
Each classroom. So technology, if you have 50 classrooms, this is not a cheap thing. And Prometheans are basically what replaces it. So that's the kind of thing that might be out there. I don't know the exact breakdown. I was just grabbing numbers. So I know that the categories of like furniture and equipment, there's science furniture, there's music furniture in there, there's special education furniture. When I was in the ABA room, there's things they use that other rooms don't use, that kind of thing. And there's supplies. That 50 has a multitude of things in it from those areas. And in technology, there's copy equipment, there's replacement electronics for the things that are going bad, probably stuff that that's being thrown out, that's old, they're replacing it. There are computers in there to replace older computers that are in there. Tech ed tools, I think, are more specific to, I'm going to give an example, but I don't have the detail on that right now. But I'm giving an example of in a CAD or in some kind of tech class, like an ISTE class, tech ed tools would be related to that. So overall, since there are some funds available, those are also things that can be reinvested into the district that then you don't have to get at a later time. It is helpful to have it happening now if we could, because that adjustment is going to be made. And that adjustment will have it will make it a little different for the future in general terms across the items in April 10th that were being adjusted. So what I tried to do in the time that I had between what I perceived to be the time that someone had asked the question to now was try to get what I could for information for you, and then you can decide what you want to do. So either you could give it to someone, you could tell me to give it to someone, or you can not. But this was just something I thought might be helpful in the process of
I appreciate all
what's going on.
It was the council person and chair that asked for it. I asked for several joint meetings and we got denied multiple times. So I was Karen was very frustrated with that. I brought it up twice last night. I just want this, and so Bill would like this. I don't know if it's gonna accomplish or just more questions that have been asked for it. I was just really disappointed.
It's too bad that we can't just talk about it as a whole group so that we can see what it is that they're looking for.
So you asked, say that again, you asked for a joint meeting.
Yeah, Wednesday night when we talked, it was requested, I did ask them, and.
Well, we suggested it at the previous town council meeting
Yeah.
in public, and then Colleen sent an official request. But then during our meeting last Monday, she sent another email
Both Dave
suggesting.
and Bill gave a thumbs down, and said basically our meeting was
There's a
not in
ways-
those words, but that's kind of the gist.
I mean, just,
Yeah, it's frustrating.
just to frame the reason for a joint meeting is, I think we have spent an awful lot of time thinking about justification of items that we have in our budget, and the reasons it's there. We do analysis of expense, and of impact of making reductions. And I think when it got to the council and they made their decision, they were really focused on financials. They were looking at the mill rate, they were looking at tax impact. I don't recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall impact on the things that we have surfaced being part of that decision. And so now that the financials look different, now that the conservative revenue estimate, which at the time we all knew that was conservative, but still, I mean, it was, I understand why they used that conservative revenue estimate, but at the time we were thinking, okay, well, this isn't gonna fly. But, and in part because that's what our state representatives were telling us. But now that that played out, and it turns out that really was conservative, they need to think about the impact. Or tell us, when does that come into the decision making?
Right.
Is impact on the education system even part of how you make that decision, or is it really just mill rate? And I'm not saying mill rate's not important, you know, we're all taxpayers, we all understand that, but education system, there's a balance between thinking about both. And I'm talking to you, really, talking to the council.
Just me.
Right,
I'm
as
writing
our
it down, but
as our
yes.
rep.
Especially, I just wanna dovetail from that, especially in a town where 99.9% of the people who live here with children will say they either continue to live here or move here because of the school system.
Got a little,
Mhm.
just disappointed. I mean, I've been serving a lot.
Yes, and that was, I mean, like Sam said, that was kind of the purpose of everyone getting around the
Yeah.
same table to
Yeah.
have one discussion instead of
And I've been, I
this.
think few of us have been on the board a long time and we've never been denied a council meeting either, or a joint one.
Yeah, it's highly unusual, I don't recall that ever happening.
Especially
and-
because
and-
we've got a windfall, like, not a windfall, but we've got the money back, and like, so we haven't been able to sit and talk and determine what it is that we're gonna do with that money, it's very frustrating.
And I think we did a good job, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done, yeah, thanks.
I think on March 26th, we did a good job of laying out the impact and prioritizing what we believe is necessary
Mhm.
to keep the quality of our education, to prevent students losing opportunities that students in the past had. And I don't know that that was transferred to the council. It was never when I had an opportunity to have that discussion. And I'm not sure what the council's thinking. I'm very curious because, I mean, I see requests come over for, that seems kind of forensic to me, you know, explain this, explain this, explain this, explain this. And so is it because the council doesn't believe the impact that we've talked about? Is it because the council believes that there's something being done wrong because we're overfunded? You know, it feels very forensic to me, and I'd like to understand where they're coming
I think
from.
that's part of my frustration I'm getting, and I know me here, I don't get frustrated or frazzled, but this one's really me questioning things myself, and that's unfortunate, because when I ran on working together, bipartisanship, and I just feel like that's slipped the least.
Yeah, I mean, we worked hard to write it down when
Right.
we weren't in the middle of a budget process, so that we would have it when we did come to this point, you know, and so.
Anyways, I don't really be the dead horse, but.
But I think it's
Yes.
important to beat the dead horse a little bit because, you know, we're looking at efforts that we've made as a board to reach out to town council so that we can work together to help the schools be the best position it can be. Given, you know, copious amounts of information, with Dr. Willits put himself, you know, he's done his job, getting the information together. And then, like, now we've got positive news from the state. Like, it, you know, like, and so, okay, well, let's go back to the 1.8, or what, I can't remember the exact number, but 1.6 or 1.8% increase, 1.8, that we, you know, try to, you know, reach out to the council and, but they don't even wanna talk to us, so, I don't know, am I just making this too
It's
simple?
not quite how I envisioned a community working.
Right.
Yeah, I just found, I find it a bit ironic that we're not even trying to implement many new programs, we're just trying to take hold and keep all of the programs that we already have that are backed by scientific research and numerical data that is published and well documented.
Yeah, this is all maintenance stuff, it's
Yeah.
not innovative at all.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we,
We just innovated.
We do some
But wait.
fantastic things, no doubt,
we
no doubt.
definitely could have much more. That we could have much more as a district. We could have computers in every classroom for every student. We could have all of these other things that other districts do have, but we're trying to keep hold of pretty much the bare minimum. And that's sad, I think, that we even have to try to do that.
I think it's important for folks who don't follow this closely to recognize that these are unusual times. You know, and I prided myself in my first 4 years on the board of really not trying to exaggerate board needs, you know, and really, you know, understanding that it takes a balance and working hard to find that balance. And these past 2 years have been different. You know, when the board puts out a budget in good faith, not putting things that aren't priorities. You know, the things that are in that budget are priorities, and it's reduced to $850,000. That's never happened before. You know, that before a couple of years ago, my first 4 years on the board, you know, $10,000 was a big number, and you know that would be a discussion. You know, and we've moved a couple digits, and it's important for folks to understand that you can't continue with a quality school system and when the revenue situation changed, understanding we're in very difficult situations, but allow this to happen to your school system, it's not good for the long haul.
So back to what to do with this piece of paper, I mean, I guess the question is, do we forward this bill, they, what they're gonna do with it? And then I want a line by line by line by line by line? I mean, that
Well-
gets a little bit ridiculous.
Well, let's just preface that by saying, we would not be directing our superintendent to do that because he does not have time.
And I think we should put in, I think it's best interest of both council and Board of Ed to sit down and talk about it.
This is a, you know,
This is a lot of
a
work.
really, this is a pretty extensive summary of those particular line items, and I would also say that, you know, when you're talking about programming and supplies and resources for the children of Tolland, this is what we need for the school children in Tolland. Another town might look a little different because they're trying to educate the children in their community. So this is,
I mean, adding on to that, I would like to resolve as a board, and maybe vote on it tonight, that that the council makes a decision on the $382,501 that the Board of Ed went through, prioritized, and came up with of scope of activity that will help maintain the quality school district we've had in the past. And I'm not sure what this is. Like, I think the way to understand this is to go through and think about the context. You can't do a forensic analysis and just say, you know, this dollar versus this dollar. You really have to understand the context behind it. And if the council wants to take that on, the council can't take that on and have Dr. Willett come to a meeting and then not ask him any questions. You know, he can't go and sit there for an hour and a half and not be asked any questions. If they really want to take it on, they can't think of it as just dollar signs. They have to think of it as activities, and they have to understand what those activities are. And if they want to do that, that's great, but it's going to take an investment of time. And if they want us to do that, well, I think that's what we do.
Right. And I don't have a problem doing something as long as a decision hasn't really been made beforehand.
So I would consider this case closed unless there's something more that somebody wants, but I think the part that's not closed is the request that we made in March, that I think we did a good job of justifying. You know, I think it's teaching positions that folks on the council have even talked about when their children were young.
So you want me to-
Services that they had that students in the future won't have opportunities for.
Is this a good time to bring up actually the communication you got today
I was gonna say, just a reminder of what that 382
about the ECS number?
I think it is a good time.
Because it was sent out apparently to all the boards and commissions in town for input on
Should we read it?
education cost sharing grant from the state. So maybe that's part of our reply to communication.
I think if we can reply in one voice, then it's coming from the
I
Board
was
of Ed.
actually gonna suggest the same
Well, it was
thing.
sent to all of us, so
Yep.
I guess that's why I bring it up now, since we're.
And I would just add that I think we can reply in one voice because we've already done the work, you know? And Dr. Willett can tell us what's changed, but I think, you know, the positions and the activities that would mean a lot to this district, we've identified.
So do you want me to just run down what it was as a refresher from March?
Yes, please.
Yes.
That'd be lovely.
So curriculum director, 155, curriculum materials, 30,000, related benefits, 35,501, textbooks, 46,000, they participate in music and art, which are different lines, but 8,000 each. 2 teachers, 50,000, 50,000, for a grand total, like I said, 382,501.
Yeah.
And that was shortened from a bigger list, if I remember.
This is from your board.
This is
March
from ours.
26th, the
March
night
2016.
before
Right, the
we-
adjusted.
The night that.
The night we met
So I don't have
for
it.
their meeting and we came with comp plans.
And we went through and took a lot of stuff out, you know, and
Just trying to get
rightfully
it down.
so. You know, some of that stuff was stuff that, you know, we had realized we could do without, but these are the things that were left.
Historically, looking at historically,
So the total amount of the ECS grant that we've been bequeathed, just made up a word, is 568,966. And we're asking, what was the total, Tom?
382,501.
382,501. If we stick to that kind of, the proposal that we had created kind of in response to the scare of 0.24% increase, I mean, personally, like, I think that's a reasonable ask. It's education cost sharing grant, 320,000 of it.
Did-
If not.
I love it.
I'm not sure why the council is putting this out now, because that question to me feels a little bit like Christmas in June. Like, oh, we have found money, and what are we gonna do with it? It's not found money, it's money that we identified in February, we identified in March. There's places where that was designed to go. The council said, we can't afford to fund those, not because, and I think this is what happened, we can't afford to fund those, not because we don't believe that they're needed, but because we are balancing that against the mill rate. Well, now we're in a different situation. So we shouldn't, it's not Christmas in June, it's let's go back to where we were in February.
Well, the only reason that this money is kind of, these funds are hanging in the balance is because we already passed our referendum.
Right.
If it was before the referendum, those funds are slated for education.
So is it that, I don't know, like some sort of document you want to send off to Bill and Dave, or then one to, can't, like, are we sending this
It's
and
a-
then
is that
sending something else to,
This to answer the question,
is,
and this in well, both in response to.
Well, Steve's the one, in Kim's email, it says send it to Steve.
so send it to Steve.
You know what I mean, like just responding to
Should we
what-
send both?
So you're referring to your list there, you
Mhm.
sent to Steve, but
Right.
you're also needing to, I
Answer
think, resolving what
questions.
you wanna do.
This
tonight.
goes
Like,
separately to Bill and Dave.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
also
that
just-
makes
These are
sense to
two
me.
different things.
Yep.
You could also tell them that we've answered this in our lengthy meeting discussion, and our meeting minutes will contain a lot of
Well, that wasn't good
information
enough for
to
them.
answer both those
They
questions.
told us that wasn't good enough.
Well, we just went through it today.
But we
too.
hadn't done it yet.
Well, the one when we said we put it up last minutes, they said, no, that's not what we
Well,
want.
you know, and generally, I gave a lot of verbal detail, if one was here or saw it on TV, minutes are what,
What we talked about last Monday.
Right.
they're, you know, about the meeting, but,
But I think when we send this to Bill, we should just take the evening and include Dave on it. This is big, you know, we can't go into every little nitty-gritty of it, you know. If they really want to be serious and sit down and talk, we have a joint meeting.
Yep.
And I think it's important that this is board consensus, so if anybody has an opposing opinion to what's been discussed, I think it would be important to raise it.
You're looking at me saying,
Because,
Oh,
I'm
no, we
invited,
just-
I'm
We
invited.
haven't heard from you guys, so, you know?
Well, I do have a difference of opinion, you can probably guess that I do, because I mean, my first question before I even would decide on putting my name on asking for another $382,000 from the council is if anything on this list is in the budget for next year already. Or was this is everything on here things that we bought because we found savings that weren't originally in the budget?
some of this helps us walk down that way.
It's reducing it to get down to the,
Stuff that we will not, hopefully, we can take the benefit of now. And you're adjusting a number of line items for next year, down to the .84, and so that comes out of that. And, you know, in general too, whenever you're looking at anything like the engineering or technical services, it's something that you don't have to do in the future. So, you know, that .84 is just something we're trying to adjust to in a number of ways. And the process was the process, and, it's part of your.
yeah, so.
My comment would be, anything on that list, we propose that we were able to, put into this, that we should review that list and see if anything's already been done and take it off the list. I thought there was some supplies or something.
None of this has already been done, to my knowledge. That's why when compiling this, I was compiling what has not already been done.
But I think what Jeff's saying is when the $382,000 was mostly 3 people. But in addition, there was $8,000 of textbooks.
Yeah,
Oh,
we did
okay.
check
Look,
and
as
stuff
far
like
as
that.
that's concerned, we have a list of curriculum that goes for, many years. And if we have an opportunity to pick up certain textbooks like, MIF 2020 or whatever, and that opportunity arises to do it now, and you don't have to do it later, then we would do it now. Whether, when that became available, just like, if something comes available anywhere, in any budget, town or board, you might look at that and say, okay, we can get a firefighter, we can get this, we can get that.
And things like textbooks, like, that would be more expensive down the road, or we don't get it at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you would want me to be looking forward and saying, oh, look, here's the curriculum, at this point in time, we're gonna need to do this with this curriculum. Here's an opportunity, let's get them. I don't know if that, and this kind of fluctuation you know, when you look back at the time that I've been here, you know, there were years of zeros, and then there were years of higher ones, and then there were years of zeros, you know, and then, so we have these kinds of things go up and down. The next year is a 0.84, you know, that's gonna require some adjusting. So, at the, you know, I anticipate next year that we probably would not have the opportunity to do certain things. So, yes, of course, we would try to do them now. And I think that's what you want me to do, you know, and we do have a list of things going out many years. You know, we know that the state has certain plans on changing, you know, this or that, so we keep an eye on what's happening. And we would adjust to the state and what they're doing, and whatever requirements are coming up on the horizon. So, you know, if somebody said, hey, school district, you know, that's why the title grants, if a title grant comes up and I can apply for it for money, or something comes up and I can apply for it, if we get those funds, we're using it on something that is part of the future, or what we would be able to get now. So, no matter where it comes from, whether it's something coming back or something we attain, there's always targeted objectives we're trying to achieve. And you see that here too, you know.
You guys are still looking at me.
I'm looking at Jeff though too.
Oh. I'm not looking at anybody.
I wanna make sure everybody's.
I would have a hard time asking the council for more money. I would, and it's not because I don't care about the education system. I know that's, you know, people have gotten angry with me about that. It's that, you know, I look at, you know, what we did this year and what line items we went over, and well, thank you for this, because it does do a great job of explaining, you know, where we went over on things. But I guess where I'm at is, you know, when I was on maternity leave, you know, we laid off a reading teacher, and, you know, I'm looking at this and I see like just a lot of things being
But
bought.
that's not, it's not like a teacher would be reoccurring.
Well,
True.
and again, you're
So-
making adjustments next year, which is why, in order to put that package together of the 848, that's why those two teachers had to go. So the things you can get now with the budget you have now are not going to be possible next year. And on the April 10th board meeting, the financial summary had all of the things and the people that were gonna get you from where you were down to that point. So these things, you know, things and people go down together next year. But you do have the opportunity now, and part of that opportunity, you know, there's a focus sometimes on over, but there's also unders. You know, town getting back some money, we, for instance, in areas that, you know, we can identify that we were under. You know, there were areas that I went over in the other meetings, so I don't want to belabor them now, but, you know, there are things like health, life insurance, dental, the things like I talked about substitutes, I talked about tuition. Tuition is a big, huge chunk of that, which we're adjusting down for next time, and that's part of the plan. But it's something you have now, and you can use that to, again, reinvest now. But that's a totally different animal than next year, you know?
Would like it be lower, you feel comfortable, or just nothing at all?
But you have.
Well, no, I think back to a meeting, and forgive me that I don't remember the date, but I remember it was one of my first meetings, and I was so concerned about our budget, the revenue page, because I was concerned about where, you know, where the money was gonna come from. Was it gonna come from the fund balance? Was it gonna come from the taxpayer? Was it gonna come from the state? And there was all these variables that I had just as a new board member, I had a hard time voting yes on the budget because I had no idea the impact that it was gonna have on, you know, the normal average person living in Tolland and what they were gonna have to pay for taxes. And then I know right now taxes are really a hot button with people in the sense that, you know, they feel like they're taxed to death. And I think we do have a great school system here, so when I think about the revenue coming in to fund our budget that was passed, we have, you know, the revenue from the taxpayer, the revenue from the fund, the ECS. So technically, I would say, yeah, that whole ECS dollar amount should go to us, the 500 and whatever it was. But then, because our budget was passed as it is, I would say lower the amount that the taxpayer pays. Does that make sense?
But our budget is lowered in a way that does not sustain our schools. So I have a
Because
problem
we
with
have to
that.
go to the 0.84, 0.86.
And the year before, we had a 0.78, and we still, like, we still hired all these people, and now, you know, the doors are shut.
But you have to-
Well, let me address that. Look, you know, we've done this a lot of times, and I respect that. I mean, I respect the fluctuation there. I think I've gone over why we hired the people that we did and why.
Oh, yes, you don't have to go through it.
But just as an
I
aside,
understand.
your non-grant staff FTE is lower now than it was in 2016.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other numbers that we can go over, but you are lower than you were in 2016. And during those years where the state had that, you know, horrible, crazy situation where you didn't have a budget passed on the back, then you had the rollback thing, and then you couldn't spend it into February, and then you had 4 months to spend. That's a totally different animal than where you're at now. The town and the board are in a situation where I think is a responsible thing to the town side, they're gonna have some money, and the board side, there's some money to consider. And both sides, I think, we're trying to figure out how to make that best use of it for the community and the people. But, you know, you've got, even during that time, the unassigned and assigned fund balance have gone up from where they were in 2016. You've got a very favorable situation. And it's because of hard work that people did that are working for you. And even if you look at the town where you were in 2016, 15, 16, before that crazy budget situation, you know, in the CAFR, you were at 8942429 for your unassigned and assigned. Went up to 10, 10, and probably will end this year at 10. You're projected at 9.7, probably into 10. You are in better shape with that fund than you were before that crazy budget situation. And you're getting favorable results from both your town and your board, you know, management here, and you're able to do things. So it's all, you know, there's reasons why, and none of those reasons are that anybody's done a bad job, board or town side. I think people have done a good job trying to get budget.
I think you really have to paint the picture that goes back to before we had that crazy budget year. Back, you know, where our staffing is lower than it was. You know, we made some significant reductions. And if you want to take the point that, look, we made those reductions, schools are fine. So why don't we just keep them like they are? And I would argue that's a very unfair perspective, because you really have to go back to before we tried to cut $2.5 million out of the school budget all at once. You know, in that crazy fall of 2017, 2017, 2018.
You had
So
2
you
years
know,
of craziness.
what was the
And
original
last
budget?
year of craziness was 17, 18.
Yeah,
So
so
I published
have
fall
budget until
2000, in
November.
the 225.
And so
yeah.
all you know, all those reductions are made to the budget, you know, put the school system in a fairly big hole. And if you want to ignore that, then yeah, I say what you're saying makes absolute sense. But if you want to acknowledge that and say, yeah, that really put us in a hole, and the school district after that really isn't what it was back in 2016, 17. And so should we really be thinking about how to close some of those losses and recover some of that impact? Or do we just ignore that and just think, okay, it was fine and it was fine last year, why don't we just continue from there? So we just have different perspectives.
One thing from that year with the, forgive me if I got this wrong, the open prayer budget, was that if the ECS number came back, it was gonna be a 75-25 ratio on the dollars coming back. I do remember that. That's the last time something like this was discussed, and did I have that right?
You were on the board, or on the
No,
town?
I
you
wasn't.
weren't.
We
Okay.
Yeah, there were a whole bunch of conditions that Steve
Yeah,
put out, but I do
Ages.
remember that,
The whole
that
prayer
ratio
budget.
was there. Not that that should apply now, but that's the last time something like this was actually discussed officially or formally.
In a joint meeting, I think.
And just for, you know, for full disclosure, the unassigned fund balance isn't up to $10 million because of hard work. It's up to over $10 million because of a pattern of being very conservative with our revenue assumptions, in spite of what they're saying at the state. But granted, we don't have a state budget, so it makes sense to be conservative, but then that money comes in later, and instead of putting it to the use that it really was intended for, had it not been for that conservative budgeting, you know, it would be applied to the things that students in the past have had, that children aren't gonna have in the future. Instead, it ends up in that unassigned fund balance. You know, that's how that unassigned fund balance grew.
So if we request the 382,501, that's 67.23% of the ECS return.
Just less
Less than
than
75.
75 split.
Yeah, I think it was 75-25 and then 70-30, so, or 80-20, those are the three numbers that
That
came
have
to
been
mind.
kicked around, yes.
should we vote, do a straw vote? You know, all voices should be heard. You know, we don't wanna say it's unanimous if it's gonna be consensus, I think, but, you know,
Consensus to,
to request,
To
I
do
mean-
the two things that we talked about, the two, well, I think we all
That's
agree to send,
this is
to
separate.
send the list.
Yeah.
I think we're now just deciding on the 382.
the response to the council and to
Communication.
their communication today, to respond as a board of a whole.
Mhm.
And that response would be to honor or at least consider what was requested in February because the situation hasn't changed. You know, February, that was solidified in March 26th. And
If it was lower, would you feel more comfortable with that?
Not really.
Not even anything.
No, I just feel like there was, I just feel like there was a lot of, and I did do some more research and some more homework on, you know, what other boards of ed do, and they do, you know, in April and May, they do spend, if there is money that from savings, you know, from special ed or whatever, they do spend it in those last 2 months, and it is an understandable thing to do, that there was this money left over. I don't wanna say left over, but there was the, you know, there was money to be spent, and I get that, and I just have a hard time asking for more when I already feel like you see it as, you know, the schools are, you know, going downhill or whatever, but I still see it as we're blessed to live here, you know. The kids in Hartford probably don't have literacy how.
Please don't,
You know,
don't
I
make
just
any
can't
kind of
compare.
assumptions
No,
about.
please don't compare that stuff to,
But, well, this is just, it's just a different philosophy.
I bet they
I
have
just
a
feel like
curriculum director.
Well,
that's fine. I'm just saying,
It's not fine. It's not fine, Chris. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say that right out. It is not fine that we do not have a curriculum director, and Dr. Willett is doing many, many jobs aside from his superintendency.
so when did we know we were gonna save $700,000 in special ed? Because maybe a curriculum director could have been one of those 13.1 positions we hired.
So, I mean, the thing that I get fearful about is this kind of, what starts to happen now is, you know, I don't wanna, you know, I wanna try to keep this in space of moving forward. And I've addressed some of these things a lot of different times, but I respect that they do tend to come around cyclically. You know, you never really do know. You make a projection based on what you think the state's gonna be and what their thresholds are gonna be and what you think excess costs will be. You do it based on the numbers you have. And so you never really know, because a child is, for instance, you know, I know of situations that are changing for us right now, that will change that number by significantly, you know, things shift significantly in this domain. Because Ann outplacement is 78,000 by itself. So these things can shift significantly. But having said that, I think again, we've explained, you know, I feel that I've explained.
No, you
the
have, well,
positions
sorry, I
best.
just got passionate.
No, I understand, and I'm here for all of you to work through whatever we need to work through. But I do wanna kind of see us move forward if we can, you know.
I just would like to say something else about the education cost sharing. So the state had and Governor Lamont had originally said, we're going to step down faster than we originally kind of promised to. And so that was what our town council said, they're saying they're gonna step down faster, okay, fine. You know, multiple people lobbied with Champaign and Los Piñas and Acker to get this money back to us from the state. So, like, it is, in my opinion, like a slap in the face to those folks who lobbied for us to get our education cost sharing money back and then not use it for the purposes that we have as a board come to. So, why did they give us the money back if we're not gonna use it for what we said we were doing? So that's just what I think.
Just a note, Champagne is a person, not an object in this case.
Yes, sorry. State Senator Champagne, State Senator Wilson
I just didn't
Phoenix.
want to be misinterpreted.
Sorry, State Senator Acker, yeah.
Not you for,
Yeah, no,
The others.
I appreciate that.
I think Lisa got that.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, the 382-501, that's like stuff that was in there because you knew as a board it would benefit children, it would benefit students, it would benefit like human beings. It's not just a number. It is materials, it is personnel that will help people learn to be better human beings and better serve a community. And it's things that were already, you mentioned the merch meeting multiple times. These are things that you cut down on as a board to what you considered the bare minimum, and then had to go below that. I as a student, but mostly as a person, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for money back, really.
Last thing, I promise, is,
Yeah, we appreciate that.
yes, thank you. I just wanted to add on to that. I mean, I don't want to there's always one conversation here, and it's a different conversation outside the Board of Education discussion. And I don't want to exaggerate or overplay what we're asking for. I would just want to say that should the council decide to put back that $382,000, there's no doubt that it will be used for the highest needs of the district and things that just have been cut that really should not have been cut.
Yes. Sorry. I'll just add too that, you know, things like the 2 positions that were cut, those were going to be positions towards cost avoidance. Those were going to be positions reallocated towards intervention. And when we say intervention, I want to make sure that everyone understands we are not talking about special education, so to speak. We are talking about intervention for the average general education student. So that would be my kid, that would be your kid, that would be your kid, your kid, your kid. Just say it's your kid. Just, you know, your general education population is the majority of your students. So I think that's a lot of bang for you. Oh, Sam, go ahead.
And those teachers have full classes. They're not extra. They're carrying full loads of.
And it's intervention we need, especially at the high school, especially at the middle school, where we don't have the investment in that going on.
It's cost avoidance. So you spend money now and hire and have positions for professionals to do this, so that down the road you don't end up with a bunch of problems with kids who are underdeveloped in certain subjects.
They don't fall behind.
They
You work on not letting them fall behind.
Again, the best graphic I've seen of it is the pyramid graphic where
Yes.
one student is affected, then next year 2 students are affected, then 4 students, then 8 students, and by the end you've reached, I think it's 98% of the entire student population if you do not use scientific research-based intervention.
I think Fisher did his homework.
So how are we going to respond to the question?
I just wanna, I'm sorry. So, to Jeff's point earlier, the textbooks and the curriculum materials, is that, so you're using it here, would you, like, so stupid to say what you need an extra, like, is that something we could reduce to make that number a little lower? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense to everybody. Not that I don't want to, but if it's more compromised to reduce it some, I don't know, just an idea to throw out there.
You are able to be proactive about these texts. Whatever the board wants to do with that, you certainly could probably do that with the texts, and maybe if they feel like that would be.
Just to show.
But, we are taking proactive measures here because of the favorable situation we're in, so.
Bring it down.
I don't
Tina,
think,
you're good at math.
I don't think, here's the thing, like, I'm the odd man out here and just what we're talking about in terms of what we would ask the council. I think you guys as a whole would ask for $382,000 to get to where you wanna be in next year's budget. I feel like I need to look at that list again that you sent me, or that you just read out loud, and maybe just kind of reread one of the things that I wrote, you know, just for myself personally, to come up with what I would think, and then I would send it to Steve. But I don't think you should wait for me. I think you should ask for what you want, and, you know, based on, you know, what Fisher said and what Kate said and Sam said and some of what all of you have said, I may reconsider my original thought of that money should go back to the taxpayer, but I really wanna just be firm in what I believe if I'm gonna ask the council for anything, and right now I'm just not firm either way, if that makes sense.
It does, and so the rest of us are saying, ask for $382,501. If something has changed and the council says, well, let's discuss a few of those items, yeah, great.
Let's meet.
And that should be part of the communication, that, you know, this is our ask, but we're certainly willing to do it together as a discussion.
Are those prioritized, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or are they just a list?
I think it was just.
Yeah, we didn't prioritize.
We didn't have the time to prioritize them.
That was green and red and yellow.
No.
Yeah,
Which
well, we
means
had,
they're
we
right.
had,
That was the March 26th meeting where we had our special meeting downstairs for an hour before they had their meeting here to vote on the,
Yeah.
The prioritization was kind of yes or no, we
there
took
were,
things out.
yes, there were minutes, but.
Yeah.
Lisa took 3 minutes for that. I don't remember.
They all blur together.
In fact,
You
we're
did.
gonna need to move on.
Lisa
We're
does.
gonna
Lisa,
move on.
Lisa,
How
Lisa.
long
Not
we
coming
do
at
that.
you, Lisa. You do a great job. Put as much as you can down. I guess.
Can we move on? Because we're gonna be here.
Yeah.
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 Sam.
Sorry. I know after I talk about
Sam's fault.
it. It is.
All right, so we're looking to do a straw poll of what we want to send to Mr. Wagner.
yeah. Do you want to first send out the list to everyone and then get, like the list that we had talked about, just so we can review it, and then, I don't know.
Our next meeting's in August,
I know, no, I know.
so if we send out a list, we have to respond and set a date by which we all respond, yea or nay, and that'll include
Right,
the 3 members that are not here as well.
right. Do we want, can we do that?
We can do it that way and do it by a poll.
I think if we really want this to happen, first of all, it has to happen soon, because
Right.
once we get through a couple more weeks, you know, the hiring season's over and the ability to, you know, do the things we need to do passes us by. You know, unless Dr. Willett wants to tell us that the situation has changed significantly since we passed our budget, then, you know, I think we just re-ask what we've already asked.
Right. I don't see the need to delay
And
the ask.
but at the same time, let's send those minutes around again for anybody who doesn't have them. So you have the minutes of the 326 meeting.
I think I'd agree with that approach.
Send the minutes to everybody.
Well, sending what we asked for then, if the situation hasn't changed, and I don't know that it has.
Do we have to vote?
I think so, will be fine, so.
Yeah.
And just have a raise your hands for sending to.
Communicating with the town manager on our ask of 382,501.
And list. And Christina's gonna think about it.
Or I thought you were saying, yes, send that from the board, and then you could send your follow-up.
Oh, you want me to say yes, send that from the board, and I'll
Yes.
send my file?
Yes.
I'll send that.
That's what you said you were gonna do.
Are you a lawyer?
No, I'm gonna set my own my own
Would you
thoughts.
CC, like, either one of us,
Yeah.
just so we know?
Yeah, that's
You
fine.
feel comfortable?
If that's allowed, I'll-
Yeah.
it's fine.
You can copy the whole board, you just.
Or just whatever you feel comfortable with, to be honest. Alright, okay.
And then moving on, so we can get our action stuff done. We still have.
Do we also have to do something about this?
I think we already decided that we're gonna,
I don't think we took a poll on it.
Oh,
I don't know.
Do we need to?
I don't
That's the
think
I
question.
don't think so, the list is just gonna go
We're gonna
and
send
date
it
because
as
it's
is.
in response to
Okay.
that.
So you want me to send them and stuff?
yeah, but like I said, I wanna make sure it's not gonna be one look from either, so I don't know.
Well,
No, at
that's-
this point,
There's
sending
nothing
it
you
is
can make
not,
sure about that.
sending it is
It's
just sending it. You know, if
yeah.
you'd like me to do that, I can, or you can take it and provide it to, him directly, whatever you want to do.
We can,
You can send it, tell me if it really
you
came.
can direct, send a list
I'll
to
just
them.
take care of that.
Okay. Alright, took so long. Committee and liaison reports.
Finance and facilities has not met.
It's only been a week, so I don't think there's any reports, other than the Constitution.
Not on the shuttle.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell
You
you
didn't-
that the next thing we're gonna do is truancy. We had to update the truancy regulations, so that'll be the next thing we talk about. But, I know Michelle has some things on her mind too.
We talked to Bob about this, but I get emails from Keith or whatever, and somebody was asking, oh, how do you handle graduation? It's just, I don't know if you remember, Sandy used to get. And you'd be like superintendent handle, and the chair is up on stage, that kind of thing, and then some districts would do, if past board members had graduating students, they were, it was allowed that they would go up, like I know, like Jane, she got to go up, but past, it's just something about that, maybe a good thing to talk about, like a policy thing, just for future,
Who goes on?
like, you know, Jane went up and was able to,
I don't think it's really a set policy, is it?
I mean,
It's nothing that's in
No,
policy.
we can, I think what we try to do is, we try to accommodate, you as board members take a lot of time out of your lives to come and do this, and, you know, if your child is graduating, and you're part of what's in the front row anyway,
but I'm just saying,
if a
but
mother or father are
past-
gonna run up and, or, you know, we're not gonna, let's pretend that we didn't let them stand there for a minute, I'm not gonna check them back, you know, like, they're coming up and hugging their kid, I'm not gonna like stop them. So I think it's just whenever there's, you know, the board is there in that front row, as you know, and if they wanna
It
do
does make it a little bit more difficult to move things along with graduation being 2 hours.
So are
It
we
was just-
saying we don't wanna have, I'm not, I apologize, I'm
No,
tired tonight,
no,
I'm not
I'm just
clear what you're
saying-
asking me.
some districts just have for like, say retired board members, and their kids graduating, whatever, that they have an opportunity, not that they have to, but they have an opportunity to go up.
Yeah, I guess my only thing with that would be, us missing someone, you know, just inadvertently, but,
It's just
certainly,
something that
we can
I
do all
kept-
kinds of things.
I kept thinking about, especially at graduation time, but anyways. So, me. Well, I went to the town council meeting last night, I had a lot of notes. At the beginning of the town council meeting, Andy Powell had a few of his troops there, to Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts of different, there was a troop, I think 14, 15, and 2 were there, and they got up and talked about what they did for the community and what their goals are and why they did it. It's actually really nice. It was packed, and then emptied out quickly, and they were done. What else? I think the other thing was, town manager discussed that it's looking like it's gonna be favorable after the audit's done, and favorable in that some funds will be returned back to the town, and what, I think they were just talking about what they may do. Can't say how much or anything, but I a similar situation that we're in.
They save some money on certain
Yeah.
things in the budget, that's great.
Great, really good. And then Katie Murray, she's the chair for the building committee. She got up and she gave an excellent synopsis, 10-15 minutes long of what's happening with their group. She really talked a lot about the portables.
Yes.
Portables seem to be coming from different parts of the country, it sounds like.
They are, the portables, this is an amazing project, they're working very hard on it, and they are coming from, my understanding was like Darien and Greenwich, places like that, where a lot of the portables, but I'm sure that they've had to get these little little cots from a number of different places, but I understood it to be Greenwich and Darien, but in any case, there's a lot of work being put into making sure those things are in place by August 1st, and we're sticking to that.
Grant or something.
Portables are 100% reimbursed by the state.
What?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, it's 100% reimbursed by the state. We have a letter from the director of school construction, reiterating that, and, it's great news for Tolland. It's just a wonderful situation that you're in from the standpoint. And if you have the 89% reimbursement, your building might cost somewhere in the 8 million, 9 million for a building that will serve your community well.
The price for a roof.
Decades. Some people work really hard. A lot of kudos to a lot of people to get you where you are right now. It's a good place.
Thank you to you too.
And then the state votes on that, and they're 89% as part of the.
89% is coming up in their special session. But my understanding is in all of the parties that I'm talking to.
So 11% of 46 million is a little over 5.
I'm just giving you a number that I don't have to walk back from. Wow, it's 5? Okay, 8. Conservative.
Well, I'm doing the math, you're being conservative.
I watched.
There was just, I think, one question for Katie. Of course, Dave's on that committee too, so he can make sure. Council members, just security, security being handled, whether that's
Well, generally the same way it's handled for any other of our buildings. The portables are really a building. They're just a different building. And so we're gonna do the access control bit. My hope is we can get a buzz system working the same way. They're all the doors are locked. We'll have certain points of entry during the day. There will be no real difference in terms of how we approach this building than there would be any other building from the standpoint that we're gonna add this building's specifics to our plan and start writing to the specifics of this particular structure from the time that we have it. And there will be some of the things you're used to seeing in other buildings. And hopefully people will feel comforted by that. There'll be some camera stuff, some security, access control pieces. And I anticipate that people will feel pretty good about it once they see it. And again, these are, there are some differences in terms of like fire suppression, things like that, but those are things that they're working on, making sure they're safe. And, again, I tell you, it's an amazing thing that's happening here. It's just, if I lived here, I would just be so happy about all the things. They're making lemonade out of some lemons you've got. It's an amazing thing. And you're getting support I have never seen in 20 or 30 years. I've never seen anything like this. I think Peter Stava would say he's never seen anything like this. I think Steve would say he's never seen anything like this. I think that sentence would apply to almost everyone working for you right now. We have never seen anything like this. So,
chairperson's report is kind of combined with everything we talked about tonight. Now we have a bunch of board actions to go through. There's 4 of them.
obsolete equipment, I'm hoping is
But what about the lunch price?
Lunch
the, sorry, J1 is lunch price, correct. Sorry about that.
We don't have,
So you have the, I think you have the same thing from last time, the rundown.
it's not, I don't think it's in here, like,
Motion to approve lunch price proposal for school year 2019-2020.
will that suffice? Second?
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, any abstentions, motion carries. J2 is the obsolete surplus equipment. Motion up there.
Motion to,
Yeah, I can give it to you if you want. Proposed motion is motion to declare the attached items as obsolete and turn the items over to the town in accordance with the Board of Education Policy 34.
so moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions, motion carries.
For this, I can make a statement about J3, right? Yeah, yes, I did not state something correctly here. I was talking about lead negotiator, you're asking me about lead. A lead is at night. The lead makes $1,000 more, it's the person who works at night. The lead custodian is the person who works at night. The head custodian works during the day. The head custodian gets more on the step cycle, the lead is the night.
So not to belabor it, what's $1,000 more mean? Is that annually? Is it a stipend?
It's added to their their pay,
They're hourly?
annually.
I just thinking of $1,000.
And then they're basically, they just are the person to go, and when somebody walks in the building, they're going to the lead. Usually, you know, hey, where's the custodian? Usually that lead will take most of the, they'll be the one who is technically the lead for the evening. They don't necessarily, you know, Peter Stava supervises all custodians. Head lead, all of them, he supervises all of them, he writes their evals, all of that. It's just who's in charge during the day in the building, who's in, you know, who's generally, the lead at night is not doing the evaluations, but they are the person who's in the lead.
It's fine, I think it just means they get $1,000.
And it's not a lead negotiator, I apologize, there's a lot of busy day, you're asking me that.
No,
and
it's
answer
good.
that.
You're
So
right.
head is
Thank
the
you.
word.
Yeah, my question was just to make sure that wasn't the same position, being
No, and I
called
just-
two different things.
I was thinking of
Yeah.
that as we were looking at all this, and I didn't answer that well. So
Sounds
it's the
good.
head.
Right, that
So
answered the
Jeff,
question.
you just meant like as far as the language and.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be considered two
Right.
different words
Yeah.
for the same thing,
It's
because that can
confusing.
get in trouble later. Motion to accept the UPSCU custodian agreement as presented in the red line document to be enforced from July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2022.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions, motion carries. Frc
Motion to approve the grant application package for the renewal of the Family Resource Center program.
Second.
There you go.
Take it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Participation.
I haven't seen them on there. So I have a few things that I wanted to ask. Some I'm not 100% sure that I recall correctly, but one is back in the November presentation, when you were talking about the salaries and health insurance and all of that. I believe you had made reference to the fact that the majority of our district paid 50% of the deductible for the HSA, and I noticed in the custodian contract it's at 62.5%. So I was kind of wondering why we're paying higher than everybody else.
Custodians.
Well,
Yeah,
I-
but better.
No, it's deductible versus cost share premium.
No, it
It's two
was-
different things.
it was the,
No,
it was
she's
paying the
right, that I'm
HSA.
supposed to, I have to wait to
I was gonna say, let her,
Yeah.
go down in that.
Yeah.
answer mouth one.
From the March 26th meeting, I'm trying to recall the exact sheet as it is, but I believe the 382,000 didn't have teachers listed. Those were listed at the bottom with zeros. The $382,000, from what I remember, was the majority of the things that you all talked about and agreed to adjust to trend. adjustment, so it wouldn't be trend and then more, I didn't believe, I thought it was part of the adjusting to trend, the $500,000 of flex money. You mentioned the 2016 FTEs were lower, enrollment is also significantly lower, and just like if growth came up, you would expect teachers and FTEs to go up. So I don't think the fact that it's a few lower from 2016 is as big when the enrollment has gone down significantly. The 10 million that you're talking about in unallocated fund balance doesn't include the allocated money to capital projects or the education reserve fund or any of the other allocated dollars. So you should really be looking at the allocated, not the unallocated. And lastly, from the perspective of the ECS money is an offset to the full budget of the Board of Ed money. So for instance, we're losing $3 million in 10 years of ECS. So I don't think anybody's looking to say your budget should be reduced by $3 million for ECS. That is a grant that offsets the full cost of the Board of Ed budget. And Sam, I believe at one point, I don't think it was this budget, I think it may have been the last budget, Dr. Willett had put the ECS loss in the budget to show the impact, and you told him to take it out because ECS was not something that got talked about when you talked about the school budget. Can't remember what meeting that was, but I don't think it was this time, I think it may have been the last time. So that's really it. Not a lot of questions, more just trying to figure out.
Thank you, Tammy.
So that's true, 62.5 versus most of them are 50, that's true. The custodians are undercompensated in a number of ways, it was one of the negotiation trade-offs that they and
You
they
just
looked
said
at
that
it
they
as-
were fairly compensated, though, that they were,
I personally think in general terms that the agreement we have has them fairly compensated. The agreement that we have decided on, I think is fair. And I think given where they are in general terms, we could lose custodians to other districts. Having that is a one-up, whereas there's other areas where we're not as high. So that's a trade-off, and that's what happens in negotiations. And, you want to keep your workforce. And the package itself is something that I think is competitive, but there are things that we have that are lower than other places. This is something that we can and they care a lot about. And that helps balance some of the other stuff that we were able to agree to and obtain. Enrollment's actually going up as of 2024. You're going to have 111 kids more in Birch Grove in 2024 than you do now, and it's going to be in an upward projection. You're right that there's a bubble going down. This will be going back up. The unassigned and assigned fund balance, whether no matter what you're including in the total, has gone up, and through the budget crisis, has gone up to 10 million, and will probably stay close to 10 million into next year. So it's at 10 million, and if you go back historically, it was at 8, 7. It's higher. Just as another aside, your per pupil expenditure, you're pretty low in per pupil expenditure. I think even worse than 138 at 166 now. Percentage of budgets, the fiscal year 14, when you're going all the way through fiscal year 14 to 19, your average is a 1.78% budget. You rank 39th in Connecticut for equalized mill rate. You're a healthy town, and you're getting a lot of really good things from the people that work for you. I think that everyone deserves to look at it from the standpoint that your workforce is working hard. Hey, with that money that they saved at the town side, maybe a fire truck, that would be useful. There are things that you can get in the budget to help support your town from the things that you've recovered, and there's other things you can do with it too. But I think since your enrollment is going back up, it's just something to keep thinking about, and that's what NESDEC shows. The other piece of it is, look, when I was in middle school, you didn't have any interventionists. There weren't anywhere near the number of requirements. There certainly weren't the 300 plus, things that you have to do now. You didn't have to assign administrators to every PPT. You didn't have to do a lot of the things you have to do now. And your class sizes are going to be decent, but they're not like out of control, incredible. You've lost 39 teachers over a span of like a decade. You've made your adjustment. You have a healthy system going on here. So, we can talk about all the FT stuff and all that. I feel like sometimes we throw these numbers over the fence and we do this back and forth. Your system doing well, and you are, you know, on the town and the board side, I think it makes sense to have conversations about, you know, making sure you have enough resources, whether it's a fire truck or teachers. You're gonna need these intervention staff. I am trying to put this in place. When we move teachers from one space or transfer them from one program into intervention, it's not because they were extra. It's because you don't have that program here the way you need it, and I am trying to get it for you. And so are a lot of other people. So that intervention stuff, you know, I'm not transferring superfluous or unneeded people. These people in these positions, you've gotta have them. That reading academy, you have to have that from the standpoint of the services you need to be providing to these kids. And if you don't, you're gonna get hit on the other end. You're going to get hit on the other end with the outplacements and other problems. So there's a lot of things happening right now to make your system, to keep your system as great as it is and always has been. And I think you have made logical adjustments, and the information shows your people on town and board side are working hard.
Just a couple of things. And some of those supports that Dr. was talking about are some of the very specific things that some council members have talked about their children having when they were going through the elementary school. And so it's things that we've had in the past that students in the future won't necessarily have if we don't make adjustments. I think Tammy was confusing, the $382,000 is exactly as Colleen listed it from March 26th. I think Tammy was confusing some of the things we took out that we said we could reduce the trend, but the things that were left in were exactly what Colleen listed. And then my comment way back when was just that we shouldn't mix up revenues with expenses, because I thought that was confusing. But in terms of the context of where we are right now, I think that has a little merit.
Any other points of information?
I just back up what Sam said, the statutes say the same thing, don't mix up revenues with costs. So what you said is what the statutes say as well.
Okay.
I'm not gonna bore you with quoting it.
We're always telling you to know the statutes.
Education statutes.
Alright, so typical teacher, hang on a second, all the time,
Yeah, and
August.
we're just moving into the new year.
August, yeah.
I'm gonna have we're gonna do some presentations for you, we'll do some tours. Ready, you know. Okay.
Alright, so,
Before we go in executive session, I think should we make the motion to go beyond 10 o'clock now instead of having it come out? 'Cause I don't think we're gonna finish by 10.
I always do.
My motion to go past 10.
Christine seconded.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Alright,
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
motion to go into executive session for the purpose of the superintendent evaluation and to invite Dr. Willett eventually, or
We're gonna go right away.
right away.
No. We have to go over it first. Yeah.
Eventually, I
Eventually.
don't know if we went.
We need to go over.
It's okay, whatever you want to do.
Alright.
Hey, listen.
It shouldn't be.
You can go take a quick snooze in
I am
the
relaxed.
conference room.
Alright.
Really?
It's time.
Maybe we'll
Wait,
go.
they were
finished the
inviting.
motion.
Right.
Well, you can go.
No, it's
I need a second, right?
Second.
The wording is to go in executive session to discuss for the purpose of the superintendent evaluation and to invite Dr. Willett.
Agree?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you,
Second.
Lisa. Sam, you?
Second? Second.
Second.
Oh, okay.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And to go to climate